Today I'd like to introduce Ilan Goldstein, who is a certified Scrum trainer based out of Sydney. And he was one of the co-organisers of the very recent Scrum Australia gathering just a few months ago. So welcome, Ilan.
Thank you very much, Kane. Good to be here.
And how are you today?
I'm doing very well, very well. Getting a bit chilly down in Sydney, but can't complain.
Cool. And so the Scrum Gathering, that was just a few months ago. How did that go? What was the feedback from that?
Well, it was a couple of, only I think about 3 weeks ago now. And for an inaugural event, well, actually for any event, we had phenomenal feedback. We were really, really happy with how it went. It was absolutely embraced by everyone who attended. We had a full audience, and it went exceptionally well. The environment, the warmth of the community, the talent of the speakers, it all shone through. And we couldn't be happier with the outcome.
Excellent. And how many people attended in total?
There were about 320 in total, which was phenomenal. Again, for a first-time event, we were expecting we were aiming for around about the 200 mark, so it exceeded those expectations as well.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, really cool.
So, as I said in my email to you earlier, this is really an experiment for me to get to know some of the more recent Scrum trainers that I'm not familiar with, Scrum trainers in general that I'm not, that I may have heard about or may not have worked with, and so I'd just like to try and get a feel for your background and where you're from and what brought you into the Scrum community.
Sure. Well, what brought me into the community? I would say that my initial entry into the broader Scrum community was really triggered by the phenomenal help and feedback that I received on some of my earlier Scrum projects. The community struck me as being exceptionally open and willing to share ideas and offer advice, and I found that to be quite refreshing. In this space, definitely not closed books. Everyone was really open, and that really triggered me to then say, hey, I want to give back to this community. And since then, that's what I've been trying to do via things like the conference, blogging, writing, training, and so on. Cool.
And was there a particular event or a particular instance that pushed you towards the Scrum community? Was there anything that that sort of started your journey towards Scrum?
Sure. I wouldn't say it was necessarily a single event. It was a collection of interactions, and I just found posting online and contacting even the luminaries and getting almost instant replies really made me start to think, hey, this is a community I want to be involved in. This is a friendly bunch who are willing to share. So it was, really a collection of smaller interactions, I think.
It's interesting to hear you say that, because my experience with the Scrum community has always been the same as well. Everyone's been very open and willing to accept you for, wherever you've come from. Everyone's been very willing to accept you for who you are. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So your very first Scrum project, do you remember it?
Well, define first Scrum project. Well, I'll define it as my first pure Scrum project, because I have to admit that my earlier projects, looking back at them, you couldn't really call them Scrum. There were a lot of Scrum elements. My very first Agile projects were actually back in 2001, after reading one of Ron Jeffries' XP drafts, and that got us actually into applying some of what are now Agile principles. So that was a long time ago. But I'd say my first pure Scrum project would have been in about, I'd say, 2006, and I do recall it. I recall it fondly, in fact, because it turned around a significantly troubled project that was. It was a deployed software application, and it literally was a year behind, and there was really nothing to lose. And so I went, hey, let's do this holus bolus and see what happens. And it really instilled significant discipline around the scope creep that was happening and the quality issues that were occurring. And it was wonderful, and it led to a string of successes for that company. And most importantly to me, and the achievement I'm most proud of, it led to a completely reduced staff attrition rate, keeping a team together. The morale went through the roof. And yeah, so while that project was troubled, I remember the Scrum element of it very fondly, and I would say that was my first my first pure Scrum project, and it worked very well.
Cool. Did you have when you first started doing Scrum? Did you have that fear? It's difficult to describe it. When I did my very first Scrum project, to me it felt incredibly chaotic and terribly out of control, and I had a great deal of trepidation and a great deal of fear. Did you feel that, or was that not really something that you experienced?
Well, I think I had a little bit of the reverse, because
oh, excellent.
I was feeling the trepidation and fear as this project was really going off the rails, and introducing Scrum, there was, as I said, nothing to lose. So I was very optimistic about it and hopeful. And it allayed my concerns. It gave me hope that there was something there that could help this really troubled project. And in fact, when I'm coaching organizations, I recommend that they start a pilot project on a troubled project, if there is one, because again, there's nothing to lose in that situation.
That's brilliant. That's really good advice. I've noticed that as well. Failed projects tend to be some of the most successful Scrum projects.
Yeah,
because as you say, they've got nothing left to lose.
Absolutely, and as you correctly point out, there's a lot of change involved, and change triggers fear and trepidation.
Yeah,
and if things are humming along nicely, I think that that is well justified. But when the project's already doomed, it can just give you hope and give it a bit of light at the end of the tunnel.
Interesting. Let's see, where was I? I've got a few questions here. Let me just go through them. Yeah, sure. Here's a good one. What's been your toughest Scrum challenge so far?
Toughest challenge so far. I would say my toughest challenge. I've had lots of challenges, but I'd say the toughest challenge that I've found, and I'm still finding, even in organizations that have adopted Scrum, is the ability or the desire, more so, to keep teams together. I'm finding that too many organizations like to chop and change teams up, pull people off, put people in, move them around for a variety of reasons. And as we know, this really damages the prospect of generating mature, self-organizing teams. Not to mention the other issues that transpire, such as difficulty in forecasting, so on and so forth. So I would say right now that's what I'm struggling with, just trying to keep the teams together. Other challenges that I've faced recently, and quite frequently, are issues around the product owner role, and them not being particularly available or empowered. That's an issue that I can usually help the organization resolve. Trying to ensure a team-centric approach to the organization rather than having this sort of spin up a project, dissolve the project mentality is probably the challenge I'm trying to resolve mostly right now.
And so, what are some of the things that you're doing to try and address that? I mean, how are you how do you talk to organisations about changing that sort of behaviour?
Well, I talk to benefits, and I really reinforce the power of self-organizing teams. I also try and reinforce in organizations that require estimations and forecasting. I explain the fact that changing teams up so much can make forecasting extremely difficult. These are the main ones, but the problems generally come in smaller organizations where resourcing is tight, but actually also in large organizations where they keep restructuring. So it can be very hard for those reasons, and I try and really find case studies and internal case studies where a team has stayed together to show those benefits, and both looking at the quantitative and qualitative benefits, looking at the morale of the team, the turnover, the staff turnover metrics. These are things I try to use to reinforce the power of keeping a team-centric approach.
Cool. Let me see. Oh, yeah. Here's another question for you. Where do you see Scrum in 5 years?
Interesting question. I'm sure we all want to have that crystal ball. Where in 5 years? I mean, who knows in 5 years? I think if I was to have a guess, and I'm looking at that sort of horizon, which in our industry is obviously quite long term, yeah. I would be saying that Scrum will certainly cross the chasm out of the software and even broader IT space into much broader markets. I'm already seeing it being applied. I'm doing some coaching for organizations who are trying to apply a number of Scrum elements, at least, to strategic management, looking at it in the marketing space. I use Scrum at home, for example. So I'm seeing it absolutely cross the chasm into broader areas, and that's what I'm really excited about. In fact, I think yes, Scrum was born out of the software industry, but as we know, Scrum is not. If you read either the core Scrum document or the Scrum guide, there's no mention of software or engineering. It's abstracted above that, and it can be applied in a number of different spheres. So I'm really seeing that as being the major development in the Scrum space, seeing it applied much more broadly speaking, and also seeing it applied and more the point, adopted and accepted as a broader strategic way of operating.
Don't you think that, I mean, obviously Scrum has, since Ken Schwaber and Jeff Sutherland defined Scrum, it's been primarily restricted to the software environment. Don't you see it as being constrained by that?
No, I really don't. And there's nothing in the core definition of Scrum that necessitates the need to confine it within that space. As I said, I've seen it being used outside of that space and being used successfully. I'm seeing culture changes that are being driven by the usage of Scrum. So I don't see any need to confine it. What do you think? Do you think there's a reason why it should stay in that software space?
No, not at all. I tend to agree with you. I tend to feel that it can be used much more broadly than just in a software context. The difficulty is always talking about an increment of potentially shippable product.
Yes.
And the question is, what does that mean?
Yes.
Outside of software? Does in a marketing field or in a legal field, what does that actually mean? And I'm not really sure that I know the answer to that.
I agree, and I actually find the same problem working with software companies, especially say in the gaming space. The concept of a shippable product is very different in that space. So what I tend to say, it is a validatable slice of of a product or of even of a service, something that can be used to validate. I was doing some coaching to an organization who wanted to use Scrum for to develop a research paper. Okay, what is a shippable increment at the end of a sprint with a research paper? So looking at something that is complete. Okay, so looking at a section that has been formatted correctly, it has been proofed correctly. It is something that is consumable in a sense. And I think that's the key to it. This wording of potentially shippable product increment, I think, is causing issues in that space. And I think we can abstract that away to be something that is complete, something that is validatable.
I like that idea. I like the idea that you're doing some validation in some context, whatever that means. But that's interesting. That's an interesting perspective on it.
Yeah.
So the final question for you: what are you up to now? What are some things that you're working on at the moment? Where are you headed for the next year and a half?
Well, I'm staying very I'm staying very busy. I'm doing a few things at the moment. The primary thing that I'm focusing on and looking to wrap up now is my first book that is actually coming out on July 29 is the date at the moment.
Congratulations! That's fantastic.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And yeah, that's been one hell of a ride, but it's really nice to have that out. It's called Scrum Shortcuts Without Cutting Corners, and it focuses on my real world experiences, and again, it's not something that is prescriptive. It's a collection of techniques and tactics and tips that have worked for me, and hopefully they can act at least as a starting point for those who have been in a similar boat. So that's taking up a lot of my time. The Scrum Australia conference also really, that was a lot lot
I'm sure it was, yes.
That's taken up a lot of time this year.
Worthwhile, I think, though.
Sorry?
Well worthwhile.
It was well worthwhile. It was very satisfying to see the community really embrace it. So that was really cool. And I'm also doing a bunch of coaching to a range of very interesting organizations. I think it's very important to stay connected with what's happening within real life Scrum teams. So I continue to do that so I can observe the changes in the landscape that are occurring with the increase in adoption of things like continuous delivery and how does that work in with Scrum. I'm seeing that trending quite a lot. And yes, I'm also running some training courses as well. So and speaking, and I recently spoke at a PMI event, which is an area I'm quite interested in doing, trying to bridge the gap between the traditional way of doing work and the new Scrum and Agile way that, funnily enough, the PMI are actually quite receptive to. So, yeah, a few things, a few balls I'm trying to juggle in the air there.
You're a busy man, Ilan. busy.
Yeah. That's me.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Great, no problem, Kane. Thank you. It's been great chatting to you.
Likewise.